Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on budgeting and NetSuite. We'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Daisy Morales. I'm the account executive here at 79 Consulting. As the account executive, I'm the point of contact for product demos, sales, customer-facing questions, and of course, the occasional webinar. Throughout this webinar, we'll be walking you through a live demo in NetSuite. We'll be using a NetSuite test account, which may be a little bit slower than you're used to, so please be patient with us. We also have a chat feature where you can ask questions during this webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to go over a few things. First, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to our chat box as we have a special member of our team answering all of your questions in real time. Secondly, we'll be asking a few poll questions throughout this time, and your response is greatly appreciated. They really do help shape these webinars. Lastly, I'd like to share a little bit of background information on 79 Consulting, which is the sister company of Tvarana. 79 Consulting was created as a way to simplify our name to our clients. Many found it difficult to accurately pronounce Tvarana, so our name was a bit of a tongue twister, so we came up with a new name for ease of use, hence as to why this may be the first time you're hearing about 79 Consulting. As a company, we were founded in 2007 as a Salesforce and NetSuite consulting firm. In 2008, we became a NetSuite solution provider. In 2014, we created our first suite app, SkyDoc, which is a storage solution for NetSuite. We now have over 8 apps on SuiteApp.com and continue to provide support, managed services, and integration services for NetSuite, Salesforce, and Workday clients. And now let me introduce today's speaker, Rebecca Nerodog. Rebecca is our NetSuite principal architect with over 10 years of product experience on NetSuite and more on the business side. She is uniquely qualified to assist our clients with solving their most challenging business processes. Let's all give a warm welcome to Rebecca.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Rebecca. Welcome again. And now let's get started with our webinar. Today, we will be reviewing budgeting and NetSuite. Did you know that according to a recent survey of 273 companies by Accenture, only 11% are fully satisfied with their planning capabilities, compared with 17% 2 years ago and 20% 10 years ago? That's why today we will be discussing why you should have a budget, why you should be using NetSuite to budget, and review a few best practices for budgeting. We will take a look at a business case study on utilizing budgets to manage various scenarios. Finally, we will review some reporting options available in NetSuite. So, Rebecca, can you help us understand budgets by explaining what it means and why they're important?
Sure thing, Daisy. So a budget will help you understand your cash flow. It'll help you understand where you're spending money and where you're making money and the relationship between expenses and income. A budget helps you communicate your goals to your team. It will help them see where they can play a part in growing the business, as well as understanding your growth goals and vision. A budget can help you guide your business in the right direction. You can identify expenses that are inflated, products that are undervalued, and where your company is performing efficiently. A budget can also help you achieve the growth goals you have defined, as well as survive an economic downturn. Budgets are a forward-looking statement that represents where you are driving your business towards. Publicly traded companies use forward-looking statements often when presenting earnings, estimates, and other income data to their shareholders. Small non-public companies can utilize the same strategy, even though they might not share their budgets publicly. A budget will make you more money.
So, Rebecca, what are some of the reasons behind using the power of NetSuite to budget?
Well, that's a great question. Many businesses that do not budget feel they don't have the time or experience to create a budget. If you're still budgeting in Excel, then moving your budget creation to NetSuite will allow you to streamline your process and save time. You can use your actual data as a starting point to create a budget with a percentage uplift with just a few clicks. This will save time and ensure that your budget numbers represent reality. Let's go through a quick demo on how to set up budgets in NetSuite. So let me switch over here over to a NetSuite account, and we'll walk through a few things. I am in a demo account, so a couple of things. It's slower than typical, and sometimes the data doesn't make a lot of sense. So please don't evaluate my screens here for data.
Thanks for that, Rebecca.
Nope. The first thing I want to show you is just the basic screen for some of the options you have for creating a budget. So if you're in as an administrator or the classic view, it's transactions, financial, and then set up budgets is how you navigate to this area. So this is a One World account. So we start with, of course, selecting the subsidiary we're creating a budget for. Then we would select the financial year that we're creating a budget for. Budget categories, these are custom values that you can add, and I'll come back to this in just a second. You would also, the currency is defined by the subsidiary, so it's going to use the base currency for that subsidiary. If you're not a One World user, then you could define your currency that you want to use. We can set a budget based on any of the segments that we have in NetSuite, so class, department, location. These are values, so if you wanted to, for an example, run a budget for your R&D department, then you could set your department to be engineering or product development, and you would be able to manage a budget there. You can do the same for any of those departments. Same for class, which are typically used as product lines or revenue streams. You could create a budget for that area as well. Also, you could do it based on a client or a project. If you had a really long project that was running for a year and you wanted to create a budget for that, a lot of moving parts, you could do so by setting the value here. And finally, an item. If you're developing, doing R&D on a product, on a specific item and want to manage a budget for that, you can do the same. So you have a lot of flexibility here. You could just set a budget for your whole company at the subsidiary level, or you can get very granular and create various budgets based on specific data. So if I go back now to a budget category, this allows me basically to just create different budgets. So you can see here that I have some budget categories that are driven by my subsidiaries. These are subsidiaries. I have a year, what's my current budget. This would be a way to name a budget so that I could run different budget to actuals. So if I was building budgets for each of my departments, I would probably create budget categories that match those values. So now I could easily, when I'm looking at different reporting mechanisms, I could easily switch between the budgets. So we have a bunch of categories in here. I'm going to be using 2020 today. But you can easily just add a new budget category by clicking the button, and it will pop out a window that gives you the option to create a new name. So that's the basics of creating a budget.
So this looks pretty comprehensive, Rebecca. Is it easy to create a budget in NetSuite?
Sure, it is. So let me show you a few more things. As well as just creating a budget from scratch like this, where you're populating all of the account lines, we can also do what NetSuite calls copy budget. So I could copy an existing budget that was already in the system and apply an uplift to it, or I could actually here copy from my actuals. So this is where I would say, what year do I want to copy from? What budget category am I assigning to this? I have the option to keep, when I'm copying from actuals, I can say keep my customer detail or my item detail or any of my department, segment, location detail. I also have the option to say what type of accounts do I want to do. If I'm creating one budget that is just looking at income, I can select just income accounts, expense, balance sheet, income and expense, or all. And what this will do, and then, then I could apply my FLIP here. So let's say we were going for a 25% growth for this next year, then I would apply a 25% lift, and my budget would be created from last year's actual. So this is a really powerful way to get started. You can also import budgets. I just wanted to show you just really quickly. If you're doing external modeling in Excel or some other platform, you can use this tool to import a budget. So it's as with most places where you import NetSuite, there's a few specifics, but this one does not fall under CSV import. So I would go again, transactions, financials, setup budgets, and then across to import. And I land on this screen and it gives me the option to download a template file. And I would, of course, recommend you start with that. And then your import would be much easier. And then you come back here. Once you have your file created, come back here once you have your file created, and you can now import that budget.
Rebecca, I'm so sorry. Do you mind sharing that screen with our audience once more? I think I may have accidentally taken over the slide.
Sure. Oh,
Thank
not
you.
a problem. Of course, of course. Let me, Daisy, you just don't want me to share anything today.
My apologies to the audience.
No problem. Was it just a import screen that we didn't catch?
Yes.
Perfect. So just the navigation again, admin or classic view, transactions, down to financial, up to setup budgets, and then import. And you land on this import assistant screen if you've done, this is similar to where we see other places like the inventory worksheet. There's a template, you click here and it will give you a template, what your budget setup should look like. Then you would populate the file and then come back to the screen to upload it from there. It's not, I wanted to show you because it's not under CSV imports. And then finally, if you wanted to use budget categories, there is a feature that your administrator would need to enable. It's just called multiple budgets on the enable features under the accounting tab. That's it, Daisy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca, and apologies again about taking over your slides.
No worries, no worries. You can have it now.
Okay. Great. Let me go ahead and share back my screen, and I'll go ahead back into our webinar. So thanks for going over those budgets. So is it pretty easy to create a budget in NetSuite? Yep.
So it is, and we can, like we said, we can do just copy actuals or copy an existing budget or do an import. Again, the external modeling is a great option for importing. Also, all the features that we've discussed so far are available on the NetSuite platform without purchasing any additional modules. If you have NetSuite, then these features are available to you. If you want to use budget categories, again, you'll need that administrator to turn on multiple budgets for you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So it's very useful to know that the features we're discussing are native to NetSuite. So let's now move on to a few budgeting best practices.
Great. This is a fun one, Daisy. So we surveyed several financial experts in the NetSuite and budgeting space and asked, what are the best practices as it relates to getting started with budgeting, as well as actual budget creation? The 4 themes below were consistently represented. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but it is a good place to start if you're new to budgeting or budgeting in NetSuite. First of all, be realistic. Base your budgets on past results. Look at prior years to determine your growth for the budget cycle. Unrealistic budgeting will not get buy-in from your stakeholders. They will see through those unrealistic budgets immediately. Second, be conservative. Budgeting growth around 20 to 30% is realistic and manageable. If you grew 50% last year, look at the trends to understand why you experienced that level of growth. Then determine if the same conditions apply before building your budget for the same factor. And be flexible. Review your budgets regularly. Recalculate when necessary. Did you pick up a new large account? How does that impact your budget for the remainder of the year? Did the cost of fuel go up unexpectedly? Be sure and factor that into your budget. And finally, be a team. Rely on your leaders and managers and consider their input on the budget. Discuss with them your goals and work together to determine how to arrive at those goals. Your budget should reflect the agreed upon goals.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Now let's take a closer look at a case study. We reached out to a small business owner who has been budgeting for several years to understand how they use budgeting to attain their goals and ensure they are as close to recession-proof as possible. Rebecca, do you mind going over a few of their recommendations with us?
Of course, of course. So first, when the company began developing budgets, they reached out to trusted business advisors to identify the best practices for their industry, size, and structure. They chose the 4 practices that aligned with their goals. Each budget process and final budget is measured against these practices. Multiple budgets. Each year they develop multiple budgets and evaluate these for growth. They utilize the 20 to 30% growth recommendation as their balanced budget. They also develop a surplus budget that represents the growth they would like to achieve above the balanced budget. Finally, they develop a deficit budget as well. This budget gives them the ability to adjust and adapt for a worst case scenario. On a side note, I'm sure we can all relate to the concept of a deficit or pessimistic budget right now. COVID-19 and the current economic climate has us all looking to the deficit budget. In fact, having this budget in place will ensure that you're making your business decisions based on data and not emotions. Throughout the year, our company evaluates their actuals to each of the 3 budget scenarios to determine their performance. Adjustments can be made accordingly. Keeping tabs on how you are performing throughout the year allows you to make wise business decisions as needed. One area to watch is your cash flow. Early identification of significant changes in your cash flow allows you to quickly make business adjustments relying on the data from your budgets. If your cash flow is up, then you can institute that surplus budget that allows you to increase your employee profit sharing percentage, or you could invest in that new hire you've been waiting on. The goal, of course, is to make wise decisions based on data. And finally, budget directionally. They model budgets from both top-down and bottom-up strategies to determine what best fits their business. For the first few years, they built budgets both ways. Over time, they landed on top-down budgeting for their company. And that's where you start with your revenue goals and then let the expenses fall into line. Bottom-up budgeting is the opposite, of course. Define expenses and then determine what your revenue needs to be.
So what kind of reporting is available when you use budgets?
Now we get to the fun stuff, Daisy. So one of the beautiful things, the power of NetSuite, if you will, is the reporting. So after you load your budgets into NetSuite, you can now run budget versus actual reports to determine how your business is performing. You can review based on various budget categories you have defined. You can look at a full year, compare quarter to quarter, compare this year to past years. You can even run reports by segment values like department and location. If you're a OneWorld user, running consolidated budget versus actual reports is simple. You can compare company subsidiaries side by side or run for each subsidiary individually. Why don't I take you over to NetSuite and show you a few reports that we can do in NetSuite just out of the box once you have a budget installed.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Again, demo account. No judgment of my numbers. This is not a real world business. Here we go. So I had a couple of screens pulled up here I wanted to show you. Let me close this. I'm showing my thunder early on. So this is a budget versus actual for a full year. For a full year of fiscal year 2019. And I'm using my budget category 2020, and I'm looking at it from a consolidated point of view. So right now, even though I'm looking at a full year's budget, I'm just seeing my amount, my budget amount, my over budget, and my percentage of budget values defined here. And this looks like all the other standard financials out of NetSuite. And I've not customized this at all. This is just out of the box how it works. So let's say I still want to look at the full year, but I want to break it down by quarter. I can come over here and change my columns to say, show me accounting quarter. And once I hit refresh on my report, now I'm going to see those same sets of columns, but for each quarter. So now I can see where I'm at, and I can see how each quarter is performing compared to the next one. I have quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then if I scroll all the way over here, I also have my same total column. So this just gives you some really nice granularity. Let's say you don't live in the world I live in, which is huge amount of subsidiaries, but you wanted to look at your subsidiaries side by side and see how they're performing from a budget to actual point of view. I can change my columns from quarterly, which is time-based from a consolidated point of view, and I can have subsidiaries. So now I can see each of my subsidiaries, their numbers, their budgets, and how they're performing. So now I can just look at them side by side and pull out any outliers. As always with reports, we have the option to export as well. So we could do a PDF export or export it to Excel if we needed to do some additional manipulation. We can also set our budget categories here. So if we had created that R&D department, we could change our budget category, and now it would be the budget that was just from that limited point of view. We can also restrict to look at locations, subsidiaries, departments, items. And then I want to show you one other one really quick that I like. This is a budget income statement. This is a forward-looking document or statement, if you will. This is building out your income statement solely by looking at your budget. So this is telling you you could do it by period or by range of periods, what your income statement would look like if you were performing according to your budget. So now the WOW that I already had pulled up, but I just want to go through it again. We can create in NetSuite out of the box again, all basic behavior. If I go back to my budget actual for the year with just a total set, I can pull in some graphs. So if I have executives or a CFO that likes to see the graphical chart as just a starting point, we can pull up a graph. I cannot use this on a dashboard, unfortunately, but I can screenshot it and send it from here or just display it. Now I can have a bar graph, a pie chart, or a line graph. I like the bar graph. I can say what's the top numbers I want to look at. So I'm going to look at my top 5. And then we have budget amount. And then I'm also going to show my percentage of budget because I like the over and under lines. I just think it makes a nice graph to give you some specifics. There's tongue-tied, sorry about that. Alternate things. You can do another y-axis. You can change amount over budget if you wanted to compare budget versus amount over as well. So you just have some options here. And these are, again, out of the box. You just do them directly in NetSuite. No additional modules or software required.
Thanks, Rebecca. Again, I know that you've stressed this so many times already, but I just want to stress it one more time because I keep hearing you say that these are native features in NetSuite, correct?
That is correct.
Perfect. Just wanted to go ahead and stress that. I'll turn it back to you.
Perfect. So along with these stock reports, Daisy, you can build custom reports to meet your specific requirements. You can build comparative reports where you compare last year's actual with this year's budgets. You could create reports for expenses only, compare a quarter from this year to the same quarter last year. You can even have a report that shows you the budget versus actual for the current period with the trailing 3 months. There are a few limitations, mainly around scenario modeling. You can't do anything really fancy except for the uplift. However, don't forget that you can do that outside of NetSuite and import it. NetSuite has built a solid platform for small businesses to get started with budgeting. Everything you build in NetSuite can be used when you're ready to move to advanced budgeting. And don't forget, you can always import those budgets.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Great. So I wanted to take a few minutes to show you guys the cash flow statement suite app that was built by Tvarana, and I'm one of those that can't say it right, so 79 Consulting. NetSuite it's really sad. I know, it's so hard. NetSuite gives your bank balance and the cash statement for a period, but how do you forecast your cash position? So to answer that question or to solve that problem for some of our users, we built the cash flow statement suite app so that you could do just that with the power of NetSuite. Let's go take a look at that now. So This is a Suite app. You can find it on suiteapp.com. It's a bundle install as with all Suite apps, and once it's installed in your account, in the Classic Center, you would go to Transactions, Cash Flow Statement, and then Across. So let me just load this one more time. I already had it pulled up, and I kind of want to show you from the beginning. So this is powerful in its simplicity, right? So we're going to, sorry about the delay there, demo account. The first thing that we do is we set our dates we want to look at. By default, it does 30 days, but I could extend this out to the end of November if I wanted to. And then the next value in a One World account, the next value I pick, of course, is going to be my subsidiary. And I'm picking on US West today. And now, excuse me, I'm going to pick my currency. And if we have multi-currency enabled, then we, of course, want to pick the currency that we look at. This currency is important. This currency selection is important because it details what bank accounts are going to show. As we know, the bank account setup in NetSuite is one-to-one to subsidiary, and the bank accounts can only have one currency. So all these things that we're selecting drives this. So now I'm seeing here a list of all the bank accounts that are available to me in this subsidiary in US dollars. So I can select, I can do my forecasting based on one account or multiple accounts. So I would just use my multi-select feature. I'm going to use these two accounts. And now that I've selected an account, NetSuite is going to show me, this cash flow is going to show me all of the open transactions that have a due date on or before my 11/30 date. So you can see by default, they are all selected as true. So it's taking them all into consideration. So I'm going to have a running balance, right? So I had a starting balance based on the accounts that I selected. And then each invoice or vendor bill is going to move my new balance accordingly. So this is just a running balance column here. So the idea of managing this is I'm going to say, so I know that this $30,000 invoice is not going to pay, right? I've talked to them and we know that they're having some issues and they've agreed to pay me on November 1st. So, or excuse me, December 1st, that's outside of my time frame. So I'm just going to unselect this and I'm going to keep going through and see if there's anything else here that that I don't want to consider in my forecast. So here's a $50,000 one, and you'll see I'm picking on all the big numbers because it shows me the biggest change when we're done. I'm just going to unselect a few of these. And good news, in my demo account here, I have more invoices than I have vendor bills. So I could also unselect a vendor bill and say, let's take this out of consideration. And if I keep going down, now I have some real bills. So here's a $240,000 one. I can say, we're not going to pay that. So when I'm done and I've made all my selections of what I don't want to include in my forecast, it is auto recalculating as we go. And now I have a modified forecast by week. So I can see I knew that what my starting balance was, and I have a final balance based on the transactions I have selected here. But it's also giving me a forecast by week. So I can see what my cash on hand should be if all the transactions are received or paid by their due date. So that's the basic of it. There's one more really cool feature I want to show you really quick. So let's go back to that $30,000 invoice. And let's just say that right here, and I saw that it was already past due. It was due on 10/5. So I just took a quick minute and I called this customer to try and get an idea of when I might pay that $30,000 invoice. And they told me, I'm going to say 11/30, just because I want to show you. So if I put a new date in here, this is actually going to edit the due date on my document number. So it was 10/5, and I'm going to switch it to 11/30, and it's asking me, it's telling me I'm going to change the transaction. Are you sure you want to continue? So I can say, okay. And now this page is going to take just a second to refresh. And when it's done, I'll be able to go look at this invoice and see that my due date has now changed from 10/5 to 11/30. So I really like this feature. just makes it pretty simple as we're going through. If there's anything big that we're working on identifying, we could just go ahead and make those changes to the due date on the fly. So I'm waiting on that to finish. It's got to run through a lot of data, and again, a demo account. So we can also download this. There we go. You cannot, well, I'm in a closed period, and obviously I don't have the permissions I need. So let's go find something. Sometimes I get in trouble in a demo account and I try and do things. Anyway, it would change the actual due date on the transaction exactly as if you went in and did it manually. So now the final thing that I want to show you is you can download this button and it will give you all the line level data in an Excel file. So if you needed to do some additional modeling or manipulation, you could do it over in Excel. Daisy, that is about it for what I have for cash flow statements.
Cash flow statements?
Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. I go through the same trouble sometimes when I go through my own demo account and I try to do something, and then I get this pesky little error message that says I can't.
Let me do it earlier today, so of course it's not going to play nice now.
Of course, it's just the way it works, right? Well, thanks so much for going over cash flow statements. We really appreciate that. It was a really great overview. It was incredibly informative as well. And that's all we have for our Budgeting in NetSuite webinar. I want to thank Rebecca for participating today. Thanks,
You're welcome,
Rebecca.
Daisy, anytime.
Also, be sure to follow us on social media. Here's our contact information should you have any questions regarding this webinar or any of our services or suite apps. Remember, we have team members across the globe to help facilitate your needs. Thank you so much again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.